Good afternoon and welcome to the People Power Lunch Hour Show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. We're broadcasting live from Philly Can TV and on WPPN LP in Philadelphia. On today's show, we are going to be talking about civic engagement and the information that citizens need in order to make our democracy work. On the first half hour of the show, I'm going to be speaking with Lauren Cristella, who is from the Committee of 70, a nonprofit organization here in Philadelphia that has been working on civic engagement, voter issues, and more for over a century. In the second half hour, I'll be joined by James Thompson from Free Press, who will be talking about the recent passage of the Civic Information Bill. We'll talk all about how you can get involved in your local elections and politics, and more on this edition of the People Power Lunch Hour Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour Show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. Again, today's show is all about civic engagement and the information that you need to participate in your democracy. I have joined with me Lauren Cristella, who is the Chief Advancement Officer at the Committee of 70, a nonprofit organization here in Philadelphia that has been working since 1904 for the sole purpose of creating a more civically engaged, informed populace here in Philadelphia. They've done a number of really amazing things. Most notably, they have helped resurrect the city's only independent good government organization, and they have also fought to change the maps here in Philadelphia via redistricting and put limits on campaign finance reform. They've also worked to just put out all the information that people need in order to participate in the elections. And a lot of people depend on the site to know what the ballot questions are, where to find their polling places, what candidates are running for office, and so much more. So welcome to the show, and thanks for talking about the great work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit more about what it means to be good government, and why this information is really necessary for people to be able to make good decisions.
Absolutely. Good government really encompasses transparency, engagement, better politics, and a government people can trust. That's what we work for and have since 1904.
Yeah, that's some of the things here are from the objectives: to open up and improve the voting process and our political culture, elect honest, capable people to public office, and help make government work better, and engage citizens in the process of making important decisions about the future. The vision is to create a government citizens can trust. These are challenging times for that.
Yes, we say make democracy great again is our new slogan. Just after the election in 2016, we had an event that had been scheduled for weeks on encouraging people to run and educating people interested in running for elected office. And before the election, we had about 30 RSVPs, and within the 3 days after the election, the RSVPs went up to about 300.
Wow.
So we really feel like this is our moment where people are looking for this information, and we're happy to provide it to a large group of the population.
Are you seeing a lot more younger people, a lot more women, a lot more diverse people start to engage with your organization?
Absolutely. Actually, in this past May primary in Philadelphia, in the greater Philadelphia region, we figured out between the hits to our website for our voter guide, which is a comprehensive hub of information for anything you would need to vote, from where your polling place is to nonpartisan information about all of the candidates running for office. We had about 13% of all of the voters use our website and our resources. So we're pretty proud of that, and we're looking to expand even further.
Yeah, it's really good to have a source that's nonpartisan too, right? There's no ads on the site. There's no like hidden agenda. It's really just the facts as it relates to candidates and the ballot questions. I think ballot questions, especially, a lot of people don't know what they are and don't know what they mean.
True. So we do provide information. We ask all of the candidates brief questions about their positions. What would they, why are they running for office? What would they never vote for? Just basics. We never endorse candidates. And with the ballot questions, they're often worded in very convoluted terms that aren't easy to understand. So we break that down, and occasionally we will take positions on certain ballot measures, but otherwise we do explain each of the ballot questions.
Yeah, which is good because the worst thing is to, get out to vote and then you're in the booth by yourself and you don't know who the candidates are and you don't know what the positions mean or you don't know what the ballot questions are. Like, I know there was like a controller election recently and there was a lot of information put out. It was like, what does the controller do?
Right.
Why is this an important position? How does it work with the mayor's government? Do you think there's still a lot of work to do in terms of educating people in Philadelphia about local government?
Yes, absolutely. So I think especially things like there's a new school board. What does that mean? How is it different from other municipalities? How is it different from the School Reform Commission? And we do see our role as educating people as much about the office as about the candidates.
Yeah, and then there's just a lot of other parts of city government that people rely on that, they're not too familiar. There's a lot of lost people at City Hall. So, like the clerk of courts, for example, going to the office of ombudsman, those types of things I think that are still a little unfamiliar to a lot of people. Do you all have educational activities and events to kind of get people to start? Because a lot of it is self-educating, right? Like you have to do the work to read and like find out more.
Well, so we're taking kind of a dual approach. So one, we want to educate students, so kids in school, and work with their teachers so that it doesn't have to be as self-directed when you're an adult. So you maybe have that information from a younger age. And then also demystifying some of these systems that are entrenched and affect your lives, like the Philly Ward Leader system, right? So we have a website dedicated to information about the ward system and who your ward leaders are and what they do.
Right, because there's the committee members, the ward leaders. There's a lot of levels and like bureaucracy to government and the party system.
Right, and especially if you come from another city, not all cities operate the same, right? Some cities have ombudsmen, some people have committee people, ward leaders, different positions, and each works a little differently.
Yeah, and especially like there's a lot of movement between people in Jersey and Philadelphia and Delaware where their systems
to transplant myself.
Yeah, right. So there, there's a lot of differences, with like townships and then county commissioners,
exactly.
And we sort of have a different system. So again, if you're watching or listening, check out their website because it will definitely give you a nice overview in terms of all the different branches of government, and especially with this upcoming election. There's just a lot of new people running, and I think it's an important time. These midterm elections are pretty crucial.
Extremely important. And it's important that people go informed. As you mentioned, you don't want to have that moment inside the voting booth where you don't know exactly who, you're making a last minute decision based on very little information. So we also offer a digital ballot tool called Ballot Ready that you can download right from our website and save all of your choices. So you can read about all of the candidates, save your picks, you can share them with friends and family so that they're informed too. And with your endorsement more than with ours or with anybody, with more people who align with your values, right? So they trust you, they trust your opinions, and we think that could be really powerful in heading to the elections in the fall.
Yeah, because typically endorsements are done by other political candidates, newspapers, and other maybe political commentators. But how cool is it to see like who your grandmom's endorsing or who your favorite professors endorsing, like by being able to like share their thoughts on the candidates.
Right.
And they can find that on your website?
Yes, that's all in the election section.
70.org.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a lot of things going on. I have a lot of notes here about the committee of 70. But one of the things I want to talk about, which is pretty current, is redistricting, right? On our show before, we've had folks from
Fair districts.
Fair Districts, PA, and thank you, and also from the March on Harrisburg. So they did a whole episode on gerrymandering, where I was even shocked when I looked at the District 1 map here in Pennsylvania and see how strangely the maps are drawn. And there's been a lot of progress on this issue. So can you talk about like some of the strides that are being, I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done and challenges, but
Well, the gains that were made this past year really came around the Supreme Court throwing out the very gerrymandered maps that you had mentioned, and we got a new map that is certainly a more fair map. What didn't change is the process that produced that unfair map. So while going into this fall's election, we do have a better map that's less gerrymandered, that will be more representative of the population. We have to draw maps again after the next census in 2020. And the process hasn't changed. And as we saw in the State House this past week, with the flurry of amendments that were added to SB 22, that was the amendment that would have changed the Constitution to have a commission that would produce kind of less partisan maps, let's put it that way. That's not progressing. And there's other things that we can do through legislation, but it looks like a change to the Constitution is kind of off the table at the moment.
so what other groups were proposing was to have an independent, like nonpartisan commission of people
Instead of
from the
legislators.
state get together and draw a more fair map. And so that is what's on the table. So if people think that that is something that should happen, they should advocate for that, right?
Absolutely.
They should talk to their legislators and talk about this bill. And that's something that often happens with bills. I've been involved in several campaigns where you put forth a bill, but then a bunch of things get taken away or added or both, and then it doesn't look quite the same as before. So that's kind of where we're at right now with like this bill. So being though this is a fluid process, folks who want to learn more about, drawing the maps and gerrymandering should certainly check out Fair Districts PA, March on Harrisburg, and 70 to learn. But there's a new website that you are launching. Can you tell people about that?
We do. We have a brand new initiative called Draw the Lines PA. And that is basically taking the same software that the legislators use, that data analysts who support this process. Like the map we have now was drawn by a professor from Stanford who doesn't really know the community, but is an expert in the software, obviously. And so we've democratized it. So we're building a website around it with support to help people and empower people, and certainly even students grades 6 to 12. We have a whole campaign ready to launch for their engagement, so that citizens can draw the maps. So if you think of elections as job interviews for candidates, why should the candidate for the job also be the interviewer, right? They're setting the rules and picking their voters.
Oh, I'm just going to draw a map around all my friends and people.
Right. So, and we have a few different there's quantitative and qualitative kind of aspects to this, but we hope it also start a conversation among communities, so schools, classrooms, community centers, senior centers, where people can talk about what they care about and what they value, because you can't value all of these principles equally when you're drawing a map. So either you want really compact, it's not an either or necessarily, but if you want compact districts that don't look like the goofy kicking Donald district that we had in our old map, but you want minority representation, that's a priority, or equal population. And you have to have a conversation about what, as a community, do you value? And that goes into the map that you draw. And so hopefully we want 10,000 maps being drawn across the state over the next few years in preparation for that next census and next time we have to draw maps.
Is there a different map for the federal districts, or are they the same?
They're different. So there's congressional maps and legislative maps. So there's State House.
Yeah, because I noticed in looking at one candidate's district that a big chunk of it was in a very wealthy area, but then another part of it was in West Philly. And it seemed like I'm not sure how somebody, could represent, both of these areas fairly, like in the
Right.
same way. And I noticed some of that with the Pennsylvania, congressional or state maps for our state legislature. Did you find that when like looking at some of these maps, is that part of the problem, the kind of the way communities are represented?
Yes. So that is absolutely a question. I think that's a lot of people in Delaware County and South Philly are having that conversation right now. There's a district now that spans both of those communities, and they have very different needs and very different, they may have different views on big issues. So this conversation about where the line should be drawn is the one that we're hoping to have over the next few years.
And for a lot of those communities, like the demographics are totally different, right? It's like different income levels. It's like different racial and ethnic communities. Some of the places are even like kind of rural, especially as you start going further out west on 76. So is part of that process to try to just get representation for those communities. I guess what I'm saying is like trying to chop up those maps even more.
There's all different ways to draw the map. So if you want minority representation, that's a good thing, right? If that's important to have more minority members in Congress or in the State House, you would draw maps that maybe put people together in a way that would seemingly predict a minority person being elected. If that's not the priority, you might draw, and a different priority is based on school districts or municipalities, or like how many times you want to break through different county lines, things like that, all affect the way the maps are drawn. And there's a lot of, it's very subjective. So this is what we're saying, that depending on what your priorities are as a community, and we believe instead of just having legislators go into a dark room and have these conversations by themselves, it really should be a more democratic process that involves the opinions and voices of the people.
The people who actually live there.
Right.
What a novel concept.
Right.
So if you're just tuning in, you're watching the People Power Lunch Hour and also listening on WPPM 106.5 FM, and we're on Philly Cam TV, on Verizon and Comcast. I'm Vanessa Maria Graber, your host, and we've been talking about civic engagement and information. I'm joined by Lauren Cristella, who is the Chief Advancement Officer from the Committee of 70. So we've been talking about redrawing maps. So they launched a new website called Draw the Lines PA, and then there's a competition involved, right?
There is. So we're inviting, there'll be different levels. So there'll be school competition, college, and adult. And the contest details will come out a little later in the summer, but we're going to launch the competition in the fall, and there will be cash prizes for maps. Like I said, they'll be judged on quantitative and qualitative aspects. So does it adhere to the Voting Rights Act and different things like that are very kind of cut and dry. And then you can explain why you created the map and what you value. And then there's going to be a distinguished panel of judges, and we'll do several rounds of competitions over the next 3 years.
Oh, that's fun. So draw the
lines, pa.org.
Sorry, this is live TV,
right.
and it's hard to remember things without a teleprompter. But drawthelinespa.org is the website that you can go to. You mentioned voting rights, which is a good segue to the next topic. One of the things that Committee of 70 advocates for is for voters knowing their rights when they head to the polls. Can you talk about some of the things that you try to highlight in terms of voter rights?
Sure. So it's voter rights and responsibilities. So what do you need to know the first time you vote? You need to bring ID, but you don't have to bring ID after that. To check your polling place before you head to the polls, to be an informed voter. So we printed voter rights and responsibilities cards in seven different languages for this last election, and partnered with community organizations across the city to get those cards out into to various neighborhoods across Philadelphia so that people could vote smart.
Right, there's been a lot of reports of voter suppression across the country. And so it's important that people know what their rights are when they attempt to vote. Have you heard reports of people kind of getting different information or experiencing some type of confusion as they head to vote?
There's always some cases of that. We've been really fortunate in the last few elections we haven't seen kind of rampant fraud and abuse or intimidation efforts. There are pockets here and there if there's a heated committee person race or something like that. But Philadelphia's been in a really good spot over the last few years.
That's good to know, but always, good to
Be
remain
mindful. Yeah, absolutely be mindful
vigilant.
And know where, that people can't be advertising for candidates or doing electioneering is the official term in the polling place. They have to keep a distance away from the polls, things like that.
Right, so the workers themselves are not allowed to tell you anything beyond, the basic information related to voting, which is, I guess, there were some reports of this. We interviewed members of the Green Party and people from, I think it's like the 187th district down in Kensington, where there were some reports of that. And, two of the people were found guilty in court. And the issue was that the polling workers themselves.
Right. They were convicted.
Right, yeah. They had put pressure on people to vote a certain way or giving them misinformation. So everyone has to be aware of that. And of course, there were journalists out there who were reporting for Spirit News who were able to document this and interview people. So again, this role of media as well being watchdog, going hand in hand with democracy.
Absolutely.
So some of those Know Your Rights pocket-sized cards have been translated into Chinese, Khmer, Korean, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So that's really awesome because we have a lot of different communities here in Philadelphia.
And they're all available for download on our website too if you haven't seen them printed anywhere.
At 70.org.
Yes.
So I just wanted to highlight some of the upcoming things as it relates to our election calendar so people can mark it on their calendars and, be aware because it's going to come up fast. And so the first day that you can apply for an absentee ballot is September 17th. And absentee ballots aren't just for people who are out of the country, right?
Right.
People who are not able to get out and vote that day, people who, can't find childcare or might be disabled. Any issue you might experience with getting out to the polls can be remedied by getting an absentee ballot, right?
Correct. I do, there are some restrictions on that, but I don't know how closely, but you can find all the details about who's eligible for an absentee ballot on our website as well.
Well, the important thing to know is that you have to do it way ahead of time.
Yes.
Before the election.
Yes.
And so if there's any reason why you can't get out to the polls and it's preventing you from doing that, consider getting an absentee ballot. But you do have to get it ahead of time. The first day you can apply for one is September 17th.
Constitution Day.
And then you have to send it out, and you can't send it out after the election or anything like that.
Right, it has to be postmarked by a certain date.
Right. That's a mistake I made when I turned 18 and I was going to college in Indiana, PA, very far away. And I thought, I'll just get an absentee ballot the day before the election.
No.
And it was very sad because it was my first time going to vote. I was really excited. And I wasn't able to do so because I wasn't aware of the absentee ballot system, and I couldn't register to vote there because I didn't really live there. So college students, especially, if you are not a permanent resident of Philadelphia, check your absentee ballots before the upcoming election.
Right.
And then the last day to register to vote, which is also very important,
Yes.
October 9th. Do you think there's a lot of people out there that totally dismiss this date? It's not on their radar?
Absolutely. And I think even for the primaries, it's for picking your party, too. So fortunately, that doesn't come into play for the October 9th deadline, but for this past May election, you would have had to pick Democrat or Republican to even cast a ballot, really.
Right. And so if you are part of any other party as well, independent, if you're just not affiliated, Green Party, Socialist Party, Libertarian, there's a lot of other parties out there. You're not going to get a letter in the mail or an email. No one's going to let you know.
Right. So, well, we're going to try. We're going to definitely spread the word on social media and through all of our channels, but absolutely encouraging everyone to vote, to register to vote. And you can check your voter registration through a link on our website as well.
Do you still have to go in person, or can you do it online now?
You can do it online.
That's really great because
Absolutely.
before you had to mail it in or go to.
And there's voter registration drives happening all over the city. Anytime there's a march, like the one that's going to happen this Saturday, you'll find people out there with voter registration forms.
Great. And then the general election, the big day, is November 6th. So don't wait till November 7th to consider voting and registering to vote and all of those things. That's going to be a really big day.
Absolutely.
What does Committee of 70 do on Election Day?
So we're hoping we have a little studio in our offices, so we hope to have various candidates come through. It's a lot of hurry up and wait on Election Day. You've basically done everything you can do to get out the vote. So we want to have different candidates and politicos kind of stop by and give their thoughts on the various races. We're hoping to send, through our election ambassador program, we engage high school students across the city. We've sent hundreds of students out to polling places armed with brief surveys and information that could be helpful to voters, just to be an assistant to voters and to see how the process works, to get them engaged at an early age before they can vote, to get them excited about the process, the democratic process. So that's been really terrific, and we have a fantastic staff member, Pat Christmas, who goes out to high schools all across the city, gets students excited and informed, and then gives them everything they need to have a successful trip to the polls, which has been really exciting to watch.
Yeah, one of the other things I want to offer people, because, oftentimes people feel disenfranchised and no candidate represents them. There's still a lot of important decisions to be made, versus just, electing a senator or a representative. There's ballot questions that are really important. The courts, right? The Supreme Court has been doling out decision after decision this week. So electing or, talking about judges. There's just a lot of things that people should really understand about elections that go beyond just a candidate. Is that right?
Absolutely. And the kind of influence and impact they have on whether people are held accountable and whether Supreme Court positions are confirmed, right? That's you can't vote for a Supreme Court justice, but you can vote for the senator who's going to play a part in approving or appointing those justices. So elections have consequences, and we're excited to see more and more people turn out. I think that's going to be the name of the game, certainly in this coming election, will be just the sheer volume of people who come out.
And then people will be paying attention to your website to find out all the results, right? Which is another service that you provide.
Absolutely.
So that website, again, is 70.org. All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura and Cristella, for all the work that you're doing. People find you on social media, or how else can people engage? Are there any upcoming events or things people should be paying attention to?
Well, we have a bar games event for Draw the Line, so if you want to have a drink and draw some maps, there's a bar in Ardmore. You can find the details about that event on our website. But Draw the Lines PA and the Committee of 70 are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and we have our websites.
Awesome. Well, make sure you check it out and stay engaged with them. They have a lot of really great information that will help you become a more informed, democratic citizen here in Pennsylvania. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with James Thompson, who's from Free Press and the New Jersey News Voices program. They've been working on the Civic Information Bill, a bill that will provide $5 million in funding for local journalism projects in New Jersey to help keep people more civically engaged. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Hello, welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour Show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. Today's show, we're talking about civic information and engagement and having the right tools to participate in democracy. I'm joined by my guest, James Thompson, who is an organizer with Free Press, a national media reform organization, who has a program in New Jersey called New Jersey News Voices. He's here to talk about the recent passage of the Civic Information Bill and all of the work that's been leading up to that about creating a more informed and engaged citizenry here in New Jersey and the whole Delaware Valley. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about the bill because we have some good news to report, right?
We do. So the Civic Information Consortium is a partnership between 5 of the state's universities, Rutgers, Rowan, Montclair State, the College of New Jersey, and the New Jersey Institute for Technology. That would be a 501c3 grant-making organization that will provide funding for projects for local news and information to make sure that people have information about what's happening in their communities, things about what's happening in their school boards, local elections, any type of local elections, city council, planning boards, things like that, information that people need in order to really be active in their communities. And so we've been working on this for about a year and a half now, and the bill actually is right now is about to go to the governor's desk. It's going to going through reconciliation, which means the Assembly is going to be taking the bill up to make sure that it's identical to what the Senate has, New Jersey Senate has, and so once that happens, it'll be heading to the governor's desk.
That's very exciting.
It is.
So in full disclosure, I've been working with James and Free Press for many, many years now on every issue from the Local Community Radio Act to net neutrality to the New Jersey News Voices program. And all of this is sort of related to communication being a human right, and how media consolidation has negatively impacted our ability to get real information that's not from corporate media. And most recently, we have been collaborating to get some of our Philly Cam members involved who have to cross state lines and come to Philly because there's nowhere that they can produce independent media in South Jersey and in the Trenton area. And so we've been able to work together to get them to come to some of these town halls and other meetings that you have. Can you tell people about some of that organizing work that led up to the bill? Yeah,
so one of the things we started by doing was we held a series of forums around the state, ranging all the way down from Glassboro all the way up to Bergen County and Hackensack. And so we talked to residents about what was some of their information needs and what it was they wanted to see in local news. And one of the things that we heard from folks is that there's been a continuation of, well, just like you had said, media consolidation. I mean, because of that, there's been less, newsrooms have been closing down, there's less journalists covering important issues. The breadth and depth of coverage has been deteriorating, and people just simply don't know what's happening in their communities. And so one of the things that we did along with hosting forums was finding ways to work with folks that were interested in making sure that they had better local media, and we activated them through our organizing, through these events. We activated residents around the state to do a whole host of different things, ranging from signing petitions, doing different drop-in visits to legislators. We hosted lobby days as well. The 2 lobby days actually we've done over the course of the past year, along with a bunch of other activities as well. And so we've been continuously driving calls to the legislature, to the leadership of the New Jersey legislature, the leadership of the New Jersey legislature as well, and also individual lawmakers as well. And it's finally starting to pay off because one of the things that it's one thing for the vision to be just about what Free Press and Free Press Action Fund wants to see in the Civic Information Consortium, but it's been driven by the hard work and dedication primarily of folks around the state who've taken time out of their schedules to make phone calls or tell their friends and colleagues about it, things like that. And so we've been able to continuously keep folks active throughout the entire process. And I think it's really a testament to the fact that people really want to take more time to see their news and information and know what's happening in their communities. And so it's been definitely an exciting journey over the past year and a half, just watching folks take ownership and take the time to actually, we actually did a day where we did a series of drop-in visits to our in-district legislators around the state. And folks felt pretty good about it. It was something that people took ownership in, they wanted to see happen. And you know, even we've been hosting a series of conference calls, strategizing about with members and activists about ways that the people can become more active and ways that people can actually can find a different strategy on how we can make sure that we're making sure that we're honing the power, taking advantage of the power that the lawmakers have in order to pass this bill. And so it's been something that has enabled us to get to the point where we're at now. Is we're right there, really close to the governor's desk and having it signed.
Well, I went to the first one that was probably like 3 years ago. And what's interesting to me is in that first one that we did, which I believe was either in Atlantic City or Asbury Park, one or the other, and people said that they didn't have as many local media outlets, right? That many of the community local newspapers had shut down. That a lot of the content that they got was from Philadelphia or New York. That there weren't a lot of people of color and women in the newsrooms. That the reporting focused a lot on celebrity infotainment news. That the reporting was short, right? Not a lot of in-depth stuff. Not a lot of investigative pieces. Not enough community information that was useful to them. Not enough good news. It was focused a lot on crime.
Yeah.
And then what I personally noticed is that every city people said about the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What was that like to kind of see that happening? Because in a way, you're collecting this really important data.
I think it was interesting. When you hear it the first time or the second time, you say, well, maybe it's just a coincidence. But when you hear the same thing over and over and over again, you realize that that there's a lot of common themes and that there's actually an opportunity to be able to try to address it and try to deal with it. And so what we thought was really important was to make sure that there were opportunities for people to be able to demonstrate and to be able to have their voice heard through this entire process. And so along with doing different petitions and stuff, it was an opportunity for folks to really talk about through social media as well, for them to demonstrate why it is that they're concerned about their own local, the well-being of the health of their local media. And so that was one of the ways that folks were able to actually to have their voices heard. I think that when you hear the same thing over and over and over again, and this is not something, even when I'm talking to folks, like talking to even friends about the work that I do, and about the initiative of the Civic Information Consortium, and how local news is deteriorated. People get it, right? People understand it, and people understand the fact that it's important to be able to have stories in local newspapers and hyper-local newspapers and hyper-local outlets to be able to have an opportunity to know that there's more than just things like crime happening in their communities, and there's also not only are there good things happening, but there's also stories that actually inspire people. And if there's something going on in your community that you don't necessarily like, and you know that there's something in your community that you don't necessarily like, you have an opportunity to do something about it because you're aware of it. And so one of the things that there's been studies out there that have shown that communities that have strong local media, people vote more, turnout is higher, people are more civically participate in their communities. people are more aware and they know what's happening. And so one of the things that we really want to focus on and make sure that residents and constituents around the state have access to information, so they can make make the type of decisions that they want to.
Yeah, that's really great. And it's important for people to be able to tell their own stories, right? Mm-hmm. Like the storytelling part of your organizing work is like where these things were revealed. And time again, people pointed to different examples of things happening in their community that were either not reported at all or underreported or reported incorrectly.
Yeah.
And so there is some awareness, right? Just being a neighbor and being like in the community, like what's going on. But then, making it an issue of importance and providing solutions and connecting it to action is where I think the news media falls short. And then the other thing is that during these conversations, not only did people point out the problems, but they very quickly pointed out solutions too, right? Like the people of New Jersey that participated in this, they knew what needed to happen.
Yeah.
So kind of connect the dots on how this bill and what's being advocated for is a direct result of these conversations that people have.
Yeah, so as we were talking to folks about this idea that we had about the consortium, one of the things that we've done is we've had a series of conversations with people about different ways of different solutions, and so there were a bunch of different things that we heard from folks, and there's a huge range. And so some of the things that we heard that people wanted to see was to be able to see more local reporting. And by that, there was something called a program called AmeriCorps for Journalism, which would mean that young journalists that are coming out of college would have an opportunity to work within communities closely for them to have a 2-year, if you want to call it tour of duty, kind of working with folks within the communities to kind of learn what's happening within, to learn the beat, to know what's happening, who's who, and who to talk to. When it comes to certain issues, when they're running a story. The other thing that we heard was civic institutes, something that would be an opportunity for folks to be able to know how local government works, how the planning board works, how city council works, how the school board works, and things like that. One of the other ideas that we heard as well that I thought was really helpful was really informative, that folks really thought was important, was having media literacy programs and media literacy curricula, making sure that folks know how to discern what type of media they're consuming and what they're taking in, so they could be able to have the opportunity to recognize what's fake and what's not credible from what is credible and what's consistent. And so those are just some of the ideas that residents had talked about. I think one of the other things that we'd also heard was that people really wanted to see a connection between, how some of the state and federal issues connect on the ground locally. For example, to kind of talk about what's been happening with down in Texas with what's happening in Texas with the children being detained. One of the things that we've noticed is that there's children have been placed all over the country, and it's informative to be able to know, what type of what people have, what children have been placed in different communities and things like that, and so and kind of how that ties into how that works with the local community as well. And so it provides us with, like I said before, and I can sound like a broken record when I say this, but the most important thing is it provides folks with an opportunity to know what's happening in their communities, and so they can become active on certain issues to make sure that people can have an opportunity to right or wrong if something is incorrect.
The bottom line is we need more local media,
Yeah,
right? And we
yeah.
need Philly cams all over this country. But in New Jersey, there's not a lot of public access community media, community radio, especially in South Jersey, like in Camden as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to get just basic information. And the other thing is that most of the information that's out there is from corporate media.
Yeah.
And that's problematic for many reasons.
Yeah.
But we need more sources of media. And there's a lot of people that are trained professionally. We saw a lot of folks come to those meetings who had once worked in radio, who had been journalists, who had had some experience writing. But because of the layoffs, lots of layoffs happening through media consolidation, a lot of people had to change careers.
Yeah.
We see that here at PhillyCam. A lot of people who once worked in radio. It's very hard to get a commercial radio job these days.
Yeah.
So we utilize those skills, right? Like once they're trained, I mean, you don't really forget how to do that stuff. So it's another opportunity to get these people re-engaged and to get people who are more connected to the community. That's a big thing happening right now in public media. A conversation about how to be engaged with the community. And one of the things that I keep seeing is like, how can public media work with community stakeholders, community members to tell their stories? Well, this is one way, right? Like by providing the funding to start these kinds of projects. So I wanted you to tell people what's needed next, because here on People Power Lunch Hour, we often let people know how they can take action and get engaged. So for all the people who are listening in our coverage area in Camden County, because WPPM reaches on the other side of the river, what can they do right now to push this bill across the finish line?
So there's something very simple that folks can do, and so we're anticipating that the bill will be at the governor's desk by the weekend. And one of the things that we're asking residents around the state of New Jersey to do is to reach out to Governor Murphy's office and urge him to pass the Civic Info Bill. And that's one of the things that we're really focused on right now. It's, like I said before, it's been a journey for the past year and a half. And there were a lot of naysayers out there that said that this either wasn't going to happen, this was a crazy idea. But this was something that, after taking the time to talk to folks around the state, that people really wanted to see something that, and this is something that's tangible, and to see that there is an opportunity to make sure that they have the information that they need. And so again, one of the things that we're really asking folks to do is make sure that you're reaching out, that the folks in New Jersey are calling the governor's office and letting them know that that the Sign the Civic Information Consortium, Sign the Civic Information Bill.
Let's get it passed, right?
Yep.
So before we end, there's another crisis happening right now with the internet, right? And we don't want to scare people, but everyone should be paying attention to what's happening with net neutrality. And there is an initiative right now through Free Press and the Media Action Grassroots Network and a whole bunch of other members of this coalition of advocacy groups who are trying to reinstate net neutrality rules. So if you missed it, Ajit Pai, who is the FCC commissioner, presented a proposal to repeal the net neutrality rules that were put into place by these very same advocacy organizations when we had a different FCC that was headed by Chairman Janikowski. And so that proposal was recently passed, and it actually happened. So net neutrality rules have been repealed. There is an opportunity, though, and this is where we educate people about how the government works. Whenever a federal agency passes a rule, regulation, or policy, Congress has the opportunity to undo that or change that via what's called the Congressional Review Act. In order for a Congressional Review Act to be voted on, and in this case it would be for net neutrality, a discharge position has to happen, right? And that brings the bill onto the floor to be voted on. And so right now, 17 representatives are needed to sign that discharge position. And one of them is located here in Philadelphia.
Yes, he is.
And his name is Representative Dwight Evans, who previously has gone on the record as being supportive of net neutrality. And so people who live in Philadelphia who are concerned about net neutrality are encouraged to contact his office and find out what his position is and what he plans on doing with this discharge position. Can you talk a little bit more about why, this is all connected, right?
Yeah,
Saving
it
the
is.
internet,
It is.
media
It is.
consolidation, Civic Information Consortium. What's really at stake here?
So I think that what's really at stake is having an opportunity to have an open internet. As it stands, with the rules being rescinded, we're looking at a place where there could be a point where we end up paying more for internet access, and that's one of the things that we don't want to have. That's at stake. Having an open internet to make sure that folks have access to all information is really important. And I think that information is power. It's important. And if you don't have the information that you need, you can't take the steps that you need in order to right wrongs. And so to me, the most important thing that's at stake right now is having a fair and open internet and making sure that people have access to it. Now, as far as the CRA is concerned, it's already passed the Senate. We're looking we're really doing a lot of organizing and advocacy around making sure that the folks that we are targeting in the House will come around. And so we're really, really optimistic that there'll be an opportunity to be able to make sure that the CRA becomes a reality as well.
Well, we had a delegation of Media Action Grassroots Network folks, including a representative from PhillyCam that went to DC to talk with our representatives and find out more. So hopefully we'll be providing you an update with that next week. In the meantime, everyone should go to the Free Press website, freepress.net, to learn more about net neutrality. There are some really great tools on the website that have kind of like a primer on what is net neutrality, what are we fighting for. It's still a term a lot of people have confusion with because, it really means, to break it down again, the big media companies who are providers of internet service can slow down the internet and charge you more for what are they calling fast lanes. And that's bad because most people probably don't have the money to be able to afford these additional costs. It's already very expensive for people, especially in Philadelphia. We're still, I don't think, half people still don't have broadband access at home. And a lot of people depend on mobile technologies for internet, which can be very costly for data packages. And so that means it's already a high cost, but it can be even higher to access those websites that are some of your favorites. And one of the ways I've heard it being described is the same way as cable is packaged by channels, websites will then be packaged that way too, but you'll be paying more to access sites like YouTube and Netflix and Hulu, etc.
And we don't want that. Yeah.
That is bad.
Yeah.
And more importantly, as media producers here, right, and as we get ready to embark on these local journalism projects, which a lot of them are internet-based or will be internet-based in New Jersey, we want people to be able to access our sites too.
Exactly.
And we don't want them to be slowed down. So again, if you're in Philadelphia and you're in Representative Dwight Evans' district, communicate with him. Find out from his staffers what the position is and what you can do. And then if you're in New Jersey, you can call the governor and same thing. Find out what his position is on the bill. And if you support it, you can ask him to support it too. Thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing.
Thanks for having me.
And I hope we can be celebrating next time.
I hope so
week,
too.
Right?
I'm crossing my fingers.
Right. I mean, this is a historic piece of media reform legislation, and maybe we'll be celebrating the passage of the CRA as well. So if you'd like to learn more about free press and media reform and the New Jersey News Voices Initiative and the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium, you can visit their website at freepress.net. And if you'd like more information about what we do here at PhillyCam, you want to watch past episodes of the People Power Lunch Hour, and if you too want to create your own media, visit our website at phillycam.org. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching and listening. We'll be back next week.